Joining us on Arirang News, I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. North Korea fired 2 ballistic missiles early this morning. South Korea's military says it's the first missile provocation in 5 days since a failed launch that the North insists was a success. South Korea continues to enjoy strong export growth, recording yet another on-year growth in June for the 9th month in a row. Overseas shipments of chips came to a record high of over $13 billion. Initial projections show the far-right National Rally Party has taken the lead in the first round of France's parliamentary elections, winning an estimated 34% of votes. North Korea has once again launched missiles this morning, less than a week after its last missile test. Now, one of the 2 missiles fired today appears to have been a failure. Pyeonjae reports.
North Korea has launched ballistic missiles toward waters off its east coast on Monday morning, after the regime vowed to take overwhelming countermeasures in response to the recent military exercise held between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. The South Joint Chiefs of Staff said it detected 2 ballistic missiles fired shortly after 5 a.m., with about 10 minutes between the launches. The first one, a short-range ballistic missile, flew 600 kilometers. Followed by a second missile that traveled only around 120 kilometers and appears to have been unsuccessful.
There is a possibility that the second missile launched by North Korea may have flown abnormally during the early stages of flight. If the missile exploded in flight, the debris could have landed inside North Korean territory.
The military also said it detected and tracked the missiles immediately after they were launched, and that it shared related information with Washington and Tokyo. The country's National Security Council also held a meeting on Monday morning to discuss response measures. Monday's missile launches come less than a week after the North claimed to have successfully tested a missile carrying multiple warheads, which the South and the U.S. assessed was a failure after the missile exploded soon after it took off. Last week, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan carried out their first multi-domain military exercise in waters south of Jeju Island. The large-scale joint military drills named Freedom Edge involve nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, as well as Navy destroyers and fighter jets. The North vowed to take strong countermeasures, adding that such drills show the relationship between the 3 nations has developed into the Asian version of NATO. But South Korea's defense ministry dismissed Pyongyang's criticism, saying the exercise was held to deter and respond to North Korea's nuclear missile programs. It also called on the North to return to talks and look after its citizens, rather than focusing on illegal nuclear missile development. The 3 countries have had combined maritime and aerial drills before, but the latest exercise was the first one held across multiple domains, including air, maritime, underwater, and cyberspace. Meanwhile, a plenary meeting of North Korea's ruling party has been taking place in Pyongyang since last Friday. North Korean officials at the meeting were seen wearing a pin with a portrait of Kim Jong-un for the first time, as part of the regime's latest efforts to strengthen the power of its third-generation leader. Pyeonjae, Arirang News.
The police are conducting investigations into the Aricell lithium battery factory fire in Hwasong that killed 23 workers. They announced on Saturday that statements by workers who witnessed the fire indicated they had never received any safety training and were unaware of the location of the emergency exits. During their week-long investigation since the fire last week, Gyeonggi Nambu Provincial Police have questioned over 20 witnesses about the fire and the factory's overall operations. Meanwhile, the analysis of seized materials from the facilities is expected to take up to 3 weeks. South Korea saw on-year growth for exports again in June, continuing a 9-month run which began in October last year. Now, it was again a strong performance from the chip industry that led the growth. An Sung-jin has the details.
Amid robust performance in the semiconductor sector, South Korea is continuing to see on-year growth for exports. According to the Trade Ministry on Monday, exports for June increased by 5.1% compared to the year before, reaching $57 billion. That's the 9th straight month for on-year growth to be recorded. It's largely attributed to a strong performance by the chip industry, with the country's largest export item seeing a record high figure of $13.4 billion, up more than 50% on-year. Higher memory chip prices and demand from server-centered industries pulled up the growth. All 4 IT products out of 15 major export items, which also includes displays and computers, saw an on-year rise. Exports of petroleum products and automobiles are also continuing to see stable performance. Outbound shipments to the United States and India reached a record high for any June, while exports to China also showed on-year growth for the 4th straight month. Exports to the ASEAN and Middle Eastern region rose as well. With strong exports, the country's trade balance stayed firmly in the positive territory, logging an $8 billion surplus compared to the year before. This is the largest trade balance since September 2020. On the back of continuing positive monthly exports, outbound shipments for the first half of 2024 also rose by nearly 10%. This led to the country's largest ever trade balance for the first of any year, totaling $23.1 billion. Robust exports of hybrid vehicles also pushed auto exports to a record high figure for the same period. The government pledged further strong export date for the second half of the year, saying it will respond to risk factors and continuously monitor export circumstances to reduce negative external factors. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea begins the second half of 2024 with major changes starting Monday. This includes the foreign exchange market being open longer and the free after-school program called Nilbom School now open to all first graders at all elementary schools nationwide. Lee Seung-jae has more on the changes.
Monday is a start to the new week, a new month, and officially the second half of the year. It also means major changes being implemented nationwide starting on July 1st. This comes as the Finance Ministry on Sunday released its booklet that contains changes to be implemented for the second half of 2024, including 233 policy changes. And among the changes, for those that trade the U.S. dollar, the foreign exchange market for the U.S. dollar will be extended from 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. to 9 a.m. to 2 a.m. the next day. Trading hours for the Korean won and other currencies will remain the same at 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. The move comes as the government looks to increase the convenience of currency exchange for domestic and foreign investors and reduce transaction costs. Also, foreign investors who want to trade Korean stocks and bonds will be able to exchange the U.S. dollar for the won in real time through domestic financial companies or a registered foreign institution. The government-funded after-school program called Nilbom School will also be expanded to be available to all first graders in all 6,100 elementary schools nationwide. The program was launched last year to alleviate the burden on working parents amid the country's low birth rate crisis. What started off with just 459 schools expanded to over 2,700 by the start of spring semester this year and will now be available in all elementary schools. Also starting Monday, as part of the government's push to provide professional psychological counseling to 1 million people by 2027, those suffering mental disorders such as depression and anxiety will be able to get free help. 8 sessions are provided through the government-funded program to those who are recognized as needing psychological counseling. More policies will be implemented throughout the second half of the year to bring about both minor and major changes to benefit people's livelihoods. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
France's far-right National Rally were celebrating a first-round win in the parliamentary elections on Sunday, now dealing another blow to President Emmanuel Macron after his party's European elections defeat. Ian Jin reports.
On Sunday, France's far-right National Rally Party celebrated a historic win in the first round of the snap elections called by French President Emmanuel Macron. After a low turnout for European elections 3 weeks ago, the first round of voting this weekend saw an unusually high turnout, close to 60%, the highest in 3 decades. While the final results will depend on the second round of voting set to take place next Sunday, projections show that Marine Le Pen's National Rally would win the most seats in the 577-seat National Assembly. According to pollsters, the far-right National Rally Party took over 33% of the first-round vote, ahead of the left-wing New Popular Front taking over 28%, and Macron's Ensemble Alliance in third with around 21%. The figures show that the National Rally Party would still be short of the 289 seats required to win an absolute majority in parliament, but it could leave President Macron to work with a prime minister from an opposition party for his remaining 3 years in office. Victory for the far right would mean that President Macron would be naming the National Rally's 28-year-old party president, Jordan Bardella, as prime minister, which would lead to a power-sharing system called cohabitation. This would not only weaken Macron's power at home, but also on the global stage. Leaving the next week for parties to form last-minute alliances, the second round of elections is even more crucial for all parties. On Sunday evening, French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal said that the National Assembly was at risk of being dominated by the far right. He emphasized that for the second round of voting next weekend, that not a single vote must go to the national rally.
So the situation is clear. The challenge of this second round is to deprive the extreme right of an absolute majority by building an assembly where we will carry enough weight to build majorities based on projects and ideas between Republican forces.
Experts say results in three-party runoff races are extremely difficult to predict, adding that rather than victory for the far right, a more likely outcome would be a hung parliament with no coalition majority, which would leave the French government in gridlock. 이은진, Arirang News.
More than 7 out of 10 Americans believe U.S. President Joe Biden should drop out of the presidential race following his poor performance during a televised debate with Donald Trump last week. In a survey conducted by CBS with YouGov on 1,130 registered voters nationwide from last Friday to Saturday, 72% of respondents said Biden should not run in the presidential election, with 28% saying he should. Now, in the same survey in February, 63% were opposed to his candidacy. And among Democratic Party voters, 54% of respondents said that Biden should run. But the results of the earlier survey showed that support for President Biden greatly outweighed opposition by 64% to 36%. At least 18 Israeli troops were injured on Sunday in a drone attack by the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. According to the Israel Defense Forces, several drones were launched from southern Lebanon towards the northern Golan Heights. The IDF added that one of its soldiers was seriously wounded. Hezbollah later stated that it targeted an Israeli military site in the area in response to IDF strikes on Sunday morning. In the hours after the attacks, the IDF said it carried out airstrikes on Hezbollah facilities in southern Lebanon in retaliation. Recently, the Iran-backed Hezbollah group has been deploying explosive drones more frequently. South Korean culture is fast becoming a global phenomenon, but there's one thing that can only be experienced in the flesh: its architecture. Our Moon Hae-ryun takes us through some buildings unique to the country that use the best of both the old and new.
Wooden beams and distinctive roof tiles are some features of this library that are characteristic of a traditional Korean Hanok building. This small community library nestled in the middle of Seoul is part of the government's efforts to conserve the Hanok tradition by letting buildings do what they do best: being lived in and used by many. A key element of Hanok architecture is harmonizing with the natural surroundings. Here the doors are aligned to provide a direct open window from one side to the other. But libraries are built to protect books from the outdoors, not to become one with it. That's why this particular Hanok building only serves as the library's reading room, while the building holding all the books is located underground in a more modern setting. After years of grappling with a strict standard to define Hanok architecture, the Infrastructure Ministry has now decided to focus on a different angle for conserving traditions, adapting traditions to fit uses and experiences in the present day.
We thought it was important to integrate this building into modern everyday life instead of just maintaining this traditional structure, which is why this building has modern lifestyle building aspects such as elevators.
A more famous example of a traditional Hanok-style building adapted for contemporary use is Cheongwade, or the Blue House, which was formerly used as the presidential office and residence. Since its opening to the public in 2022 following President Yoon Suk-yeol's relocation, more than 5.8 million visitors have come to visit the compound. The main building boasts the traditional roof tiles in blue, which gives it its name, with the underside patterns also in the same hue, a unique feature as these patterns typically contain bright colors such as red. The interior reflects much of the authentic style, with wooden beams for the ceiling and window frames and breathable hanji, traditional Korean paper, on the walls, with the surrounding gardens called Nokjiwon home to more than 120 variety of trees, setting the lateral landscape where Hanok buildings are best suited. Repurposing old buildings into new means that they are able to maintain the history of the original. which is important as places often reflect lifestyles of the people who use them. This whole museum of craft art was once a royal palace and then a high school for girls. Royalty, students and now young children have walked these grounds.
The architects tried to portray how memories can also be built like a building. So the building that was originally going to be demolished has been kept, with the observation platform still intact.
In the ever-changing cityscape, conservation of traditional architecture will be more than just maintaining the physical characteristics of the building. Making it accessible and easy for the public to use will be the goal going forward. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
As the Korean gardens are getting attention in the global garden expos, all eyes are now especially on Korea's cultivating of native plants. Cha Yoon-kyung tells us more.
At a horticultural farm in Sejong City, Alscholzia pyeonsanensis, chrysanthemum flowers, Picris hierarchoides are cultivated. These are native plant species commissioned by the Korea Arboretum and Gardens Institute this year. The species are appropriate for creating gardens with great ornamental value. The plants grown by farms are sent to exhibitions or festivals after being delivered to the Sejong National Arboretum.
We can stably cultivate native plants by securing a market. I am getting massive help in building farming capacity.
The Korea Arboretum and Gardens Institute has worked in tandem with local farms for 5 years since 2019. The institute selects native plants of high quality, improves the varieties of plants, and supplies them to horticultural farms in Sejong and Bonghwa, along with cultivation techniques. It also provides proceeds after securing a stable market for farms through contract cultivation. The plants grown by farms are on display at the exhibition hall of the Sejong National Arboretum and Baekdudaegan National Arboretum to meet consumers. This process is beneficial for horticultural farms, arboretums, and also residents.
Flower exhibitions and festivals need lots of plants, so they collaborate with local farmers who have facilities and expertise in farming plants. Farmers can make proceeds from this and people can enjoy beautiful flowers.
The Sejong National Arboretum is also creating new jobs with educational plant kits targeting vulnerable social groups such as disabled people.
I was so amazed that I could make a lotus flower garden by pouring water onto the seeds. I hope these kinds of products become more commercialized as disabled people also need to make a living.
Meanwhile, the Korea Arboretum and Gardens Institute has signed contracts with 73 farms, and the industry's output value hit more than $1.4 million, as well as more than $29 million for local festivals. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. In Western Europe, deadly storms across France, Switzerland and Italy left at least 7 dead over the weekend. 3 people died in northeastern France on Saturday when a falling tree crushed the car they were traveling in amid fierce storms and torrential rain. According to the AFP, a 4th passenger is in critical care. In Switzerland, 3 people died after torrential rain triggered a landslide in the country's southeast, while another was found dead in a hotel in the Valais region. Police say the victim likely drowned in fast-rising floodwater. Several hundred people were also reportedly evacuated from the area. A storm also temporarily halted the Euro 2024 game between Germany and Denmark in Dortmund on Saturday. In Nigeria, at least 18 people have been killed and 40 injured in a series of attacks carried out by female suicide bombers. Local authorities stated on Sunday that the suicide bombers targeted a wedding, a hospital, and a funeral in Nigeria's northeastern Borno state on Saturday. A Borno State police spokesperson said a woman carrying a baby on her back detonated an improvised explosive device shared on her at a crowded motor park in the town of Gwoza at around 4 p.m. local time Saturday. He added that later on, another attack was carried out at the funeral for victims of the wedding bombing. New York City's annual Pride March took over the streets of Manhattan on Sunday as the supporters of LGBTQ+ celebrated the parade. This year's Pride March marks the 55th anniversary since the Stonewall Uprising, where the patrons of Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in Greenwich Village, fought back a police raid. With this year's theme being Reflect, Empower, Unite, the rainbow-laden march hosted a wide range of festivities as well as political protests. As the month-long celebration of LGBTQ+ Pride comes to an end, Chicago and San Francisco, among other locations, held parades to mark the occasion. Kim Xiao, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. After a windy and rainy weekend with the season's first monsoon rain pouring down in central areas, the mainland will be free from monsoon showers today. Heat, however, sets in for most of Korea, kicking off July on a muggy note. And afternoon highs should be 1 to 5 degrees Celsius higher this afternoon. So Seoul, Daejeon, and Chuncheon should get up to 31 degrees this afternoon. Gyeongju will have highs soaring to 33 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Mostly sunny skies expected for most parts, with Gangwon-do and east of Gyeonggi-do seeing 5 to 20 millimeters of passing rain in store. But those on Jeju will continue to see on and off a monsoon rain today. Then that monsoon rain is forecast to return nationwide tomorrow. Rain will lash down on Jeju, dumping up to 150 millimeters of downpours. Central areas could see more than 120 millimeters into Wednesday, along with gusty winds. Then please brace for frequent monsoonal rain this week and stay safe out on the roads. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have at this hour. Arirang News will be back at 2 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.